and the breadth of the challenges that we as a country face, but then how we come as different stakeholders from multidimensional and multi-stakeholder perspective to enable these transitions. So that by 2030, which is due to growing population, urbanization, economic mobility, India resource extraction of 1,580 tons per acre is 250% more than the world average of 450 tons per acre. And most importantly, 583 million people in India by 2030 will be living in urban areas, creating a need for heavy infrastructure. These data points and the transitions that are happening from their perspective, that what are some of the successes, the practices, the case studies that they have been part of, that they are working on, and we learn more from them of what their organization is doing and what in their personal and professional capacity, what they have been up to, and we just dive deeper into the discussion. So here I would like to invite Dr. Mukesh from All India Institute of Local Government. And I would love to hear, Dr. Mukesh, from you, share about your organization, what you guys are doing, and how your organization is enabling the transition to circular cities. Over to you, Dr. Mukesh.
Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Yash and the organizers, Pyxera Global, ReLondon, for having me here. It's certainly a privilege to be here, and this is a very apt day because today is United Nations International Day for Poverty Eradication. And I believe there can't be an apt occasion than this to have this webinar, because the thing that I have realized through the learnings from field is that this circular economy sector is not just a brick and mortar phenomenon. It's about the human lives, and it has very close relation with the poverty reduction. My organization, On Minister Local Self Government, has been very closely associated with the overall urban poverty dynamics and its interplay with the circular economy. Uh, there are certain issues that I like to focus more on. One aspect is the systems perspective, whereby how various stakeholders, it's certainly a multi-stakeholder synergy that it should be, how they synergize, how they come together, their roles, relationships, and dynamics. What kind of systems and processes, their maturity, and the kind of facilitation support mechanisms which are available or which will be needed for furthering of this sector. Because as very aptly put forth by Yash, there is huge potential in this sector, and of course it's going to increase leaps and bounds if we take two time horizons. Plenty of data is available, so I won't be speaking on any data points, etc. What I'll be more interested in talking about is talking about the systems and processes and how those multiple stakeholders synergize. My organization has been part of a very crucial similar dynamics when urban poverty started getting attention post census 2001, and then around 2006 we started hosting this National Resource Center for Urban Poverty, because as the scale of the entire issue and of course the related opportunities were realized, there was a feeling that we need to have support mechanisms which really would make this entire effort very systematic, organized, and scientific. And that kind of National Resource Center for Urban Poverty, which was a combined initiative of Government of India and UNDP. There was another entity my organization got associated with called SNPPR, Policy Protection. So let's Currently the great degree of focus is on cities, smart cities, etc. For me, through these deliberations, there can be more highlight on what really happens to the cities, small and medium towns, cities of smaller denomination, which capacities and resources. So just for few points for further deliberation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mukesh. And I think urban poverty is a super critical plays a super critical role in that because, again, as I said, the migration towards cities, and there is a stats that says that by 70% of the population will be living in the cities all around the world. And again, India is not limited by that. So I would really like to take a step away and come back to you and learn more about the initiatives that your organization is working in poverty at national resource urban planning and with the government. But before that, I would also love to hear from Sagarika here, that Sagarika, when we talk about circular cities and when we talk about this resilient, inclusive, regenerative economies for future, what is your perspective in your professional and your personal leadership from a private sector perspective, that where are we and how are we enabling this transition? So do you have some past, like successes or some challenges in your capacity? And as a private sector, what do you think that that role should be?
Great. Thank you so much, Yash, and thank you to ReLondon and Pyxera for inviting me to be a part of this session. And I'm looking forward to hearing not just from my co-panelists and you, Yash, but also I hope there are questions from our audience as well. I think I've spent most of my career working with either civil society or corporates. And I think in the last 10, 12 years that I've been part of CSR, I've seen a shift in how companies are beginning to see how they can, what they expect from CSR, what they can commit to with CSR funding, for example, or even at a more core level, how they see their own businesses and the role of business in society, really. I think for me, there are, in the past, I've been part of a large Indian conglomerate. Currently, I'm working with a multinational IT company. And I think 2-3 of the common themes that I see across businesses that keep their responsibility, their citizenship focus at the core of their business, and it's tied to their purpose. I think the 2-3 things that I see emerge are, one, the role of that their core set of values, their purpose plays, and the intent that they bring to committing to any aspect of a social, environmental, or an economic cause that they are committed to. So one is that core bit around intent, and who the business is, what is the culture that they have. So that's number one. I think a couple of the another sort of emerging factor is the role of employees. I know we hear a lot about how Gen Z, even the millennials, have influenced companies to think through how their purpose is created or carved. But it's true, I've actually seen that in action. And in terms of how employees are wanting to be more engaged with core socioeconomic environmental problems around them. They want information, and the numbers who turn up to just for awareness sessions or volunteering sessions is tremendous. So I think that's another factor. The third factor is clearly, I think external. Third and fourth are external in terms of either investors, rather investors on the one hand, and then regulators. I think both of these stakeholder groups play a huge role in how companies are evolving and what society is expecting from them. So that's one part of the problem. the one part of how companies are responding to situations. And then, of course, is what they're doing within the fence in terms of how their own carbon footprint is being measured, what they're doing to mitigate it, what they're doing to address these issues. And secondly, what they're doing in terms of their core products or services that they're offering. Right? So what is in that value chain? A lot of, I know there's a huge thrust on life cycle analysis, for example, of products, and that's bringing real change in the way these products, in the way R&D teams are looking at it, in the way marketing teams are looking at it, and sales teams are sort of putting products out in the market. And even in emerging economies, I think in the last 10 years, a lot has shifted from the notion that, oh, emerging market consumers are not as aware, they're not demanding these things, but I think that shift is happening. It may be stratified. It's not that consumers across the pyramid are necessarily demanding environmental friendly or products from inclusive suppliers, etc. But that change and the shift is happening, and it's happening right before us. So that's the internal side. And then the external side about how is a company sort of really looking at investing in circular economy related issues, right? I mean, this is just one, and since that is the core topic today, what are we doing to use our CSR funds for everything from afforestation, water conservation to solid waste management, and also the role that you're playing in terms of ecosystem building, right? I think that's another, the more the corporates that want to be ahead of the curve are really spending a lot of time to develop their own voice in the matter. Yeah. What is their standpoint? I see this happening very clearly, that there are companies that are not shy of taking a stance now and putting out their position very clearly in the public sphere. So yeah, just some initial thoughts. Hope to discuss more.
Thanks, Sagarika. And I think it's a good setting of the stage, because Dr. Mukesh talked about, how bringing in the dynamics of urban poverty, and then from urban poverty we move to the dynamics that the role that the private sector has, but how private sector themselves is first evaluating both internally and externally when it comes to their culture, their intent, and how are they engaging their employees to enable this transition with the kind of investments that they are thinking for. And another important dimension to circularity, and especially in cities, when we talk about the transition of cities to circular cities, is putting people at the core in circular cities. Because most of the time when we talk about circular transition, even at the policy level, and right now, we just finished G20, even the biggest agenda at the G20 out of three agendas were waste management or resource management, I would say resource management. But I think resource management is important, but again, it is super important to look from a bigger perspective of people. And here I would like to come to Shweta, because she is one of the founders for this International Center for Equity. And Shweta, I would really love to understand from you that what the center is doing, and what is the vision of this center, and how do this center envision its role in enabling the circular transition in cities. Over to you, Shweta.
Yeah, a very good afternoon from India to everyone, to my fellow panelists, and many thanks to ReLondon and Pyxera Global for inviting me to share our learnings and experiences vis-a-vis circular economy. And I'll be narrating more from the experience and learnings from my organization, All India Institute of Local Self-Government, and there is a dedicated center there, International Center of Equity and Inclusion for Transformation. So as part of our accountability towards the underprivileged populations, we have been working directly with the communities at the grassroots And our experience suggests that circular economy, this transition from linear economy to circular economy is going to expand horizons in terms of livelihood, it is creating a lot many newer opportunities. At the same time, it is also going to accelerate our progress towards United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, SDG 1.
Shweta, I think there is some challenge with your internet
One,
connectivity.
which
Can you
is no poverty, no hunger, or reducing poverty. Am I audible?
you
Am I
are audible,
audible?
but your video goes off sometimes. So can we try just
Hello.
without video for a moment?
Shall I close my video if that's
Let's see if that works better,
hello?
because we can hear you well otherwise. Yeah,
Right. So let me. Is it better now?
yeah,
Yeah.
we can hear you well.
So I was right. Right. So this transition from linear economy to circular economy is expanding a lot and expanding and creating a lot many opportunities for skilling, upskilling, expansion of livelihoods, expansion for growth. It also contributes to United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. For example, SDG 1, reducing hunger and poverty, and to SDG 5, which is more on gender equality and women's empowerment. And here the core at this is the underprivileged and disadvantaged populations, and how this process of change and expansion also takes everyone along, specifically at the bottom of the pyramid populations, how it promotes social inclusion and gender inclusion and creates more opportunities for empowerment of the disadvantaged populations. So having working at this NGO, All India Institute of Local Self-Government, we have been working through our center, International Center of Equity and Inclusion for Transformation, with the communities, directly at the grassroots with the communities from urban areas, rural areas, and tribal areas. And like Shashi shared, that there would be huge increase in urban population, very rapid urbanization is happening, and one of the factors that is contributing to it is also rural to urban migration. So when these entire huge influx of rural populations are migrating to urban economies, and are they skilled enough to be able to get accommodated in the cities, and in terms of what are their needs other than the basic survival needs of food, shelter and clothing. What they need is livelihoods, and what they need is livelihoods not just as waste pickers or rat pickers, and in informal economy, because India's informal economy contributes to more than 20% of the country's GDP. And that's why there is this huge potential and untapped potential, where we can actually use this drive for circular economy to create more jobs, to create more livelihoods opportunities, formalizing existing informal jobs of waste pickers or rat pickers or recyclers and scrap dealers, and the entire set of urban mining, where they say that there is so much of electronic waste is getting generated, and how we reduce this dependency on virgin resources or newer resources. Instead of that, can we extract and make use of optimum utilization of the existing resources? So and that creates a huge opportunity to take care of livelihoods for this huge influx of rural to urban population that is going to migrate. For example, in our work with denotified and nomadic tribes, we realize that all these earlier tribal populations were nomadic, and then they lost their earlier livelihoods, but they are not educated, and they are not skilled enough, but they are migrating in huge numbers in urban areas, and this migration is only going to increase in next decade or so, and where the cities are going to accommodate them. So circular economy provides that opportunity to provide that avenue to accommodate this large influx of population by undertaking many strategies. And that's why this social inclusion and social cohesion is very, very important. The that is the first part of it. The second aspect of it is how we can reduce pressure on our metropolitan mega city and mega cities. Like, of course, there are so many mega cities. Like Mumbai has a population which can boast of a smaller country population across the globe. Such big influx of population, and 50% of Mumbai's population is living in informal settlements or slum settlements. At the same time, if we start developing small and medium towns, that will also reduce pressure on the existing mega cities, metropolitan cities that are, anyways, facing a lot of um, pressure and strain on their existing infrastructure and livelihoods as well. So developing, the second point is how we can leverage the circular economy drive by developing smaller and medium towns, creating better livelihoods, better basic services that also provides for a better social cohesion and gender inclusion, as will be able to take care of this large, untapped population and the persons who are contributing to informal economy. So that's the second part of it. Third part of it, how we can make it more gender inclusive. So currently, a lot of rag pickers, waste pickers are women and who are working on daily wages, earning some petty amount of money. And there are cities, there are case studies that will be presented, I'm sure, in this panel, where how these systems and these informal economies have been formalized by the support of the local governments, and there is this huge impetus and programmatic and policy impetus from government of India through its various programs in last decade that is leading to this transition to circular economy. At the same time, local governments are playing a very, very important role for formalizing a lot of informal economy workers into this entire process. So these are the 3 points that are very, very important in the context of social and gender inclusion vis-a-vis circular economy.
I thank you very much, Shweta. And I think these are some most important points here because, like as I said, most of the time when we talk about circular transition and investments in circularity in cities, most of the focus is basically of the policymakers, urban planners, and investors is around, again, like resource allocation, waste management. But as I said, the whole concept of social inclusion is limited yet, and there is a lot of scope, and we should look at some of the neighboring or some of the other countries in the world that has been able to do this transition quite successfully. And it reminds me of the example of the city of Amsterdam, where the core focus of city's circular plan is on ensured job growth, on reducing unemployment and increasing productivity and offering a reasonable standard of living for all. And another point that really makes me think a lot when we think about the transitions, most of the time we look at these major metropolitan cities which are overburdened. And I think instead of starting there, how about we first build the capacity of tier two cities and get the burden from these major cities, well organized in these tier two cities that again has a lot of potential. And especially with this growing economy, there are a lot of other economic enablers that can help bring this balance between the larger metropolitans and the tier two cities, because again, we can't afford to have 70% of our population just being managed by top 10 major metropolitan cities in the country. And that's again is building challenge and pressure on the government here. So with all these base, I think we have some incredible point from urban poverty to the role of private sector. Again, how can we leverage not only the private sector investments approach towards their businesses, but also how can we really look at the CSR funds that the private sector brings in enabling the smooth transition. And I also love this whole idea about with this huge growing migration towards cities in future, how are we capacitating first the communities right from their source once, and then integrate them into the formal economy. So with all these points, I would really like to open the discussion with three major threads for us to keep in mind.
Windows. Tama. Anthony.
How about we start? Yeah, basically, my idea here for us to look at is when we look at the circular cities or we imagine circular cities. Let's take an example of one of the classic commendation that come from a city of Surat in the country. And again, Surat for the viewers is one of the major cities in Gujarat. Again, it's a business hub, but again, it's an growing tier two city, and it has really the administration has really played an important role how to consider the culture and spirit of its citizen when achieving circularity. So again, learning from what Surat has been done, Sagarika, can you hear me now? Awesome. So I'm just setting the context before I come up with questions. So again where Shweta left about inclusion perspective and learning from the successes of one of the circularity models of Surat, where they have brought the spirit and the culture of citizens at the core of achieving circularity. I want to come back to you, Dr. Mukesh, in terms of how do you bring that to practice by sharing some of the examples in some cities that you have successfully implemented or you have found some challenges when it comes to the dynamics of urban poverty, and how do you integrate it with the needs of resilience and inclusivity for these cities for future.
Uh, yes, some of the fundamental points as we take a futuristic perspective while building on our urban poverty experience with policy facilitation, etc., are whether we really have a exact hang of the scale of the issue. And in each tier of cities is one very crucial part of it. And a related aspect is whether we have the related tools in place. For example, when we started tackling urban poverty, developing templates for future, one of the aspects we did was developing city profiles for urban poverty, state profiles for urban poverty, and very importantly, developing those standardized frameworks. So after going through a very scientific process of piloting them in different types of these cities vis-a-vis tiers, then they were replicated on a very wider scale, a pan-India scale. So firstly, if I bring that analogy, that learning to circular economy, for me, getting those kind of templates in place whereby it can facilitate any city with respect to its own type of population size and economic configuration should be able to develop by itself, of course with the local multi stakeholder involvement. So this is one part of it. So developing those kind of profiles and enabling the stakeholders to develop those profiles and having that kind of resource center support to have these systems in place. The mention of multi-stakeholder synergy also takes us to the important question whether we have those roles, relationships, and dynamics formalized in a way. Is there a kind of, there can't be a very rigid prescriptions, but is there any certain do's and don'ts kind of thing? And how this multi-stakeholder scenario, because it's very easily said than done, unless there is a kind of clarity on the part of each and every stakeholder, whereby they understand that this is for synergy and how really we bring in the entire inclusion perspective. The third related aspect is usually a stakeholder that gets forgotten in the process is the community itself. So, apart from the migrant community that we are expecting to foresee soon, one very good classic example given by another panelist was about the nomadic tribes community. huge influx is expected, 107 million in 2000, as per 2005-6 technical committee report of government. And even if 50% of them migrate to the cities within next decade or so, because they are losing their livelihoods very fast, are our systems geared up for the purpose? Also, the current slum dwellers who are going to benefit from this circular economy, but what about their participation in the entire process? Again, this will need a very demystification of circular economy, because one can use very great degree of jargon to narrate this, but it won't really help the cause. What is really expected is demystification of the entire gamut. For example, the effort that my organization is doing with the support of Idemitsu of India CSR on the plastic waste management front. This is one of the very first important step that we are undertaking. Whereby can we put this forth in such a simple visual form, whereby even an illiterate person should be able to understand. So this demystification for community participation and creating very conscious processes whereby community participates is a very important aspect. And when we imply community, again, there is a very traditional gender bias into it. So, how really we highlight, appreciate, and enable women's participation becomes another very crucial aspect to be pondered over.
So, Dr. Mukesh, I would love for you to give us one example of one of the interventions in one of the cities where you see the impact of this demystification really taking a good shape in enabling a transition and integrating it to the bigger picture.
Yes, yes, I'll take example of Pune city, being on the National Resource Center for Urban Poverty experience, whereby my organization anchored the urban poverty alleviation livelihood cell for the Pune city. And it was not to duplicate the effort that the governmental agencies are already doing, but to create those kind of very standard templates. So we developed slum profiles for urban poverty, city profiles for urban poverty. Also, a very important aspect which gets forgotten in the process, and which has very important link with the climate action, risk and resilience building, is the disaster risk reduction aspect of it. It has very close interplay with the circular economy, because it can really help in a lot many dimensions, the circular economy with respect to disaster risk reduction. So we also develop those kind of frameworks for how we developed those DRR, disaster risk reduction plans for slums. And these again came together as a part of urban poverty alleviation livelihood cell that we anchored under the National Resource Center for Urban Poverty on behalf of Government of India and UNDP. And then this really fed further into the action planning for urban poverty in the city of Pune. So this is one example. So it's just not just one part of urban poverty, but how we transcend this to circular economy, also including the disaster risk considerations into it.
Sure, Dr. Mukesh, and I think it's an important aspect because you mentioned about having these templates, and when I think about like the templatization, it's a four-step process. Basically, how do you establish that entire framework for the cities to get to an assessment phase where they can assess where they are and what is the roadmap that they need to take. I think the four most important thing, and I think this will lead to my follow-up to you, Sagarika, is that again, like there are four major I would say areas. One is about raising awareness and making sure that we have a second a stronger case of why do we need a transition to circular city. And third, what brings those triggers to action. And then, once we have these three phases well defined, I think the fourth one comes with the monitoring the performance and evaluating results. And I think now with the smart city model, most of the major cities have a evaluation and performance review at the end of every financial year. But again, from the private sector, you raise a very important point when it comes to some internal factors, which is about the culture and role of employees. And here I think the whole idea about raising the awareness, because again, large corporations in employing large employees of cities, they live
Yes,
in the
you
cities,
faded
and
out.
again, we factor that can enable.
I
Am I audible better?
Now you are, but if you could repeat the last part from where you started talking about the private sector's role and what you were expecting.
Yeah, so from private sector, what do you think that the engagement of employees can enable in raising the awareness at the city level? Because again, these employees represent cities where they come from, where they live. So again, for me, it is interesting to understand how a private sector thinks when it comes to circularity and circular cities, in raising awareness, how they can engage their employees, and also right from raising awareness, how can that create a case for circularity, and that could trigger to an action that brings private sector investments not only from CSR but also from their business investments to enable the circular transition in partnership with civil society and government.
Great. No, I think that's a terrific question because I think it is really at the core about the role of the average citizen in solving the most critical issues that surround us today in the world, right? And I think businesses, at least the more enlightened ones, for sure, the larger, whether they're in India or anywhere else in the world, have realized the critical role that corporate employees can play, because the corporate has the year of their employees, right?
Yeah.
These are people who've been, I mean, they may be of any age or gender or role in the organization, but work plays a very important role in shaping who we are, the identity of, typically if people, you're introducing yourself to a stranger, one of the first things, probably one of the top three things you'll tell them is the fact that what you do or where you work, right? So therefore it's not a leap to sort of to the point that corporates play a huge role in shaping the sort of how employees see their role in society and vice versa, right? So I think I'm seeing a lot of, a few clear trends in this space. One, I think in the last at least 3 to 4 years, and the pandemic did play a role in this, that we all focused a lot on our families, our homes, our societies. There was a lot of both direct and indirect, physical or virtual volunteering that happened during that time. And even in organizations which normally did not have a very high number or a very high participation rates in volunteering, they suddenly saw that shift because people realized how vulnerable each one of us is, right? I think in that sense, the pandemic was a huge leveler, right? It didn't matter your privilege or status and so on. It made you realize that we're all human beings, are completely vulnerable to situations like COVID. So I think I think that whole notion around what does sustainable living mean? What can each one of us do to contribute? I know that my current employer, SAP, past employers, the Godrej Industries Group, many other, I think I can, off the top of my head, I would be able to rattle off at least a dozen odd companies that I know that have either launched in the past or are in the process of doing so, modules and sort of essentially initiatives around sustainable living, which is centered on their employees. How do employees become more sustainable themselves, in their families, in their communities? I know they have ways and means of encouraging employees to then go outside and try and influence a wider set of people beyond just their own families. So that's one thing that's happened. And associated with that, of course, is volunteering. I'm not getting into that. That's fairly established already. Another thing that I'm seeing a lot of is our innovation challenges. And innovation challenges not just to do with the core product or service that that company has to offer, but actually innovation challenges and hackathons. For example, IT companies love hackathons, right? But they're actually now, working with CSR teams, sustainability teams, HR teams to talk about how can we solve social, environmental, economic problems that are there in the society. What can we do as employees? Can we sort of convene either ourselves or in larger mixed groups and try and figure out, deconstruct some of these problems, and what do we have to offer? So that's another thing that I'm seeing a lot of. And then there are these personal initiatives. I think SAP has it, Godrej has it, these purpose-related initiatives, right? So there are actually monetary compensation, I mean, I won't say compensation, but monetary awards that are set up by companies like these, focused around passion projects or purpose-driven projects that employees have. And a lot of these would be centered around social environmental challenges. I remember, so Godrej has this one initiative called Loud, Living Out Your Dream. And they would do this in campuses, and then they realized that why not do this with our own employees, right? So the whole focus was employees had to come to, basically apply for initiative, some sort of a personal initiative, which was linked to social environmental problems. Many of these had to do with waste management, with inclusive communities, and then, the winner got to work with, and we worked with the CSR and sustainability teams together with these winners to actually implement some of their dreams and their sort of ideas. So I think there's a lot that's happening here. It's about also trying to put some structure around this, so that employees have ways and means of taking it forward. It would be, this is also getting reflected in a lot of citizen effort. So Bangalore, as we know, is one of the most socially conscious and aware cities in the country in any ranking that it shows up. This is one thing that we see a lot in Bangalore, right? This, citizen-led initiative to make change happen at the grassroots. So yeah, I'll pause there. Thank you.
No, I think the most important point that struck with me is that for especially private sector or government, it's not only a strategic transition because the world is grappling with social, economic, environmental crisis, but this transition has to be purpose-led, purpose-driven, because otherwise, we can only, as I said earlier, the major decisions right now are interest towards what are the economic outcomes of this transition, but sometimes we fail to integrate the impact of social inclusion, the impact of the impact that the communities are facing because of the the challenges that the linear take make waste approach comes up with. And I think this another point of innovation challenge also strikes me, because again, from private sector we have these, especially from tech, we have these hackathons and other areas where we get to see a lot of new greener solutions for these transitions that needs further scale up and investments and support acceleration for systemic change. But that really takes me to my next quick question for Shweta, because Shweta, I would really love to understand from you in terms of, have there been any kind of social innovation that your International Center for Equity has taken in the communities that has really got you the results or recognition for the whole purpose for the International Center, and how can we learn? And especially, we have a lot of acceleration support for these social innovations from private sector. possibly if we get to know what is also happening at the intersection of the communities and social sector, that would also help us to bring that in integration when we look at the bigger scope of the transition to circular cities.
Mm. Uh, yes, yes, Sarvesh. And I would like to, you have touched upon innovations, and I would also like to build upon one of the fellow panelists who talked about innovation challenges, a lot of which a lot of corporates are focusing on. And I would also like to share that world has started moving from innovations to frugal innovations. The innovations that cost really less are very effective, are more participatory in nature, and its integration to drive these community processes is which was recognized by Risk Award, social innovation on micro planning for risk and resilience vis-a-vis disaster risk reduction with center staging participation of women and children was recognized by United Nations Risk Award 2015, and would like to share that what we have learned from that innovation, share our learnings from that innovation. So, a disaster risk reduction efforts, or disaster management, or risk and resilience efforts are mostly macro, are driven by macro planning, and there is this national and state governments and local governments kind of smaller catastrophes happen. They happen at a micro level. So there is this huge slum which is on a hill slope, and this year also we have read so many news articles around that. That number of lives lost, the loss of property and infrastructure because of these kind of annual kind of smaller disasters that keep on happening. And that's why might we understand what is needed there. And then we work with the community to build their risk and resilience efforts. So similar processes can be adopted vis-a-vis circular economy, because very rightly so, there is this government impetus and focus on macro level, how we can effectively implement it with the wholehearted participation of the community is very, very important. And that's why developing pilots in each city, in each area, we can develop pilots. For example, from one of our corporate supporters, we have developed this pilot of environment lifestyle centers, which is environment friendly lifestyle. So we are developing this cadre of youth, children, working very closely with the women to drive that change at the community level. That if every person owns up their accountability to save or preserve environment or to enrich environment, either by smaller efforts of planting trees, and we have taken it through employee volunteerism with our corporate partners. Every year we do that, and so these kind of involvement of multi-stakeholders, right from corporates to community, that how this can be upscaled and replicated within city, outside cities, in rural areas and tribal areas. And circular economy provides us that kind of a huge avenue where we can start developing these pilots and drive this change at the grassroots level. And very importantly, so there is an important role of fostering innovation, fostering innovations not only in terms of technology and products. A lot of private stakeholders, private corporate partners are working towards that, but even at process level. For example, behavioral change is very, very important. So when we are talking about reducing waste, it starts from each individual. How much engagement, so whether they are recycling, reusing, reducing, and how we are dealing with that is very, very important. When we talk about resource efficiency for circular economy, it also drives an individual action leading to a community action and becomes more cohesive. So it becomes very actionable, but it only becomes actionable when we have participation of each and every one right from the lower strata to higher strata. So that's why these participatory innovations are equally important, in addition to these frugal innovations, that micro planning and establishing, demonstrating through pilots is important so that it can be upscaled and replicated. And multi-stakeholder approach where governments, corporates, civil society working with the community, equity, inclusion, and gender inclusion. So there has to be this social inclusion. There should be social security benefits built in for the underprivileged populations, for the informal sector economy workers who are contributing hugely to drive the circular economy change at the first two steps. Right? Like they're right there at the at the front line of it, right? So it becomes more awareness, knowledge, and information vis-a-vis that at all tiers, right from the community. And there lies the role of resource centers or technical expertise, because they're currently it's at very nascent stage. It's growing. Circular economy is growing, but it's still at a very nascent stage. And to take it ahead, we need to outreach to more and more people, and to bridge this gap in information, knowledge, communication, and how each and everyone can be a part of this entire movement. So it's not just only one policy and one program or coalition of a lot stakeholders, but every individual has to own it up. And one of the approaches through our own programs that we have established is a movement of youth and mentoring youth to drive this change. And India is in a position of demographic dividend where there are a lot many, youth are there. There's this young energy and enthusiasm, and how we can capitalize on it to drive this change. And lastly, I would like to highlight on the innovations part of it. For example, innovations need not be an Apple iPhone. So of course that is a different kind of innovation, or electric vehicles, which are very, very important. They are creating jobs and all. But frugal innovations, simple innovations, because for our grand challenges, Canada supported social innovation vis-a-vis visually challenged girls, to give this health and reproductive health education. We involved their participation in creating this audio tactile tool of a Khushi doll. It's an audio tactile tool because they are visually challenged. Not every stakeholder or every visually challenged woman or a girl is braille literate. So we developed this audio tactile tool where there were audio recordings fed. A lot of recordings were also in the voice of those visually challenged women and girls. At the same time, it was very cost effective, and that's why there is a role, because we took their suggestions, views, we build it with them. So there was this entire participatory approach which was very, very important for even to drive that Google innovation. So this is where I would like to pause.
Thank you. And your son is saying it's time to to break. So basically, now that thank you very much, Shweta, for this, because everything that you said is somehow not represented well at the policy level or even at the interest level when it comes to look at the systemic transition. Because as I said initially, like most of the focus is towards the like the technology side of it, or the resource utilization management, waste management side of it. But every aspect that you shared from the inclusion perspective is critically important for us to bring actual inclusiveness and resilience when it comes to the future of our cities. So, you know what, like listening to all of you, and again, complete apologies on our side for technology not being super favorable today from like different parts wherever we are. And I really appreciate all the attendants who are still with us, because how important every comment that has been made by these incredible practitioners and leaders is. And I think it's super important for us to able to find a way where you can really integrate these efforts. And the transition to a circular economy can only be achieved when all the stakeholders, right from individuals, private sector, government, social, civil societies collaborate. And we really need to have a forum, because like there are so many several thousands of transactions that happens in tandem, but we really need one forum that brings the recommendations from different stakeholders and able to help to pave that policy level or systemic integration when it comes to systems change. And another most important thing that I picked up from Shweta is that it's just not only a multi-sectoral or a multi-stakeholder approach, but it also a mindset transition. Like not only all the innovation needs to be Apple innovation or iPhone innovation, there needs to be some space and scope for frugal innovation so that the cities can adapt and change and invite the innovations as per their local contextual thing. And for me, the mindset transition is super important towards the circular economy that needs to be integrated with actions over long term in different areas and also administration at several levels at the government and private sector. But also it connects the dot with what Sagarika told about the purpose at the corporate level, because again, we tend to get stuck most of the time with the strategic outcomes of the transitions or any interventions of the systemic scale. But I think most important here that mindset shift needs to happen because like still we are subjected to this big crisis level of transition acceleration to circularity because of the role some industries has played in their business that has led to us to this overutilization of resources, basically fossil fuels consumption, and all of these kind of things over the period of years has led us to this situation that really needs us accelerated action approach. So a lot of mindset needs to be worked with along with the strategic elements of the transition to circularity. So I think with this note, I really appreciate everybody who joined us today, and I really congratulate ReLondon for bringing us all together, putting this under celebration of the Circular Economy Week 2023, and giving different cities, different regions a platform to share their perspective, their challenges, and to learn from those challenges and perspective. And I hope we'll get to learn more from different sessions across the days and the week here. So again, thank you, Recity, and all the panelists for joining us today. And I think it's a collective effort that needs to be made in order for us to achieve this transition for our cities and for our communities to thrive and survive in the fast changing dynamics of the world. So again, have a great day. Thank you very much, and we look forward for more such discussions and dialogues and take the learnings to more action and more collaboration. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.